Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hardcore Finance Show with Alex and Shimon. How are you doing today, Alex?
I'm in a funk. How are you doing today?
You've been better, is what you're saying?
I've been better. I think I'm echoing the common kind of sentiment of the whole market. We've been better.
Yeah. I mean, it's brutal. It's interesting that the interest rate increase has all of these ripple effects. And unfortunately, our industry took a big hit. I mean, more and more stuff is coming out on this whole FTX debacle. But yeah, some good friends of mine lost everything on FTX. Very, very, very sad. People were asking, why would he risk his $32 billion valuation by stealing clients' money, allegedly? The thing is, it wasn't a $32 billion valuation. It was all built
It
on
was bullshit.
Yeah, it was all built on a scam. So hopefully our industry can grow stronger from this long term, even though it's painful in the short term. What do you think?
At least I have my pretty coffee.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing was a scam. The more and more things that are coming out about how they did due diligence. I mean, if anything, there's going to be a big fallout from this. Jim Bianco from Bianco Research had a good podcast. I think it was the Blockworks podcast a few days ago. They were talking about punitive, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also some, I'm not here to spread conspiracy theories, but however, there are a couple of things that are inconsistent here. One, this is just pure fraud. Pure, blatant, disgusting fraud. And what's actually more disgusting is that the New York Times did a piece on Sam and made him out to be some sort of like some entrepreneur or altruistic, billionaire who lost his way. It's bullshit. I mean, this guy literally stole people's money, like, and just completely, whether he knew it or he was oblivious or he didn't put the right controls, had nefarious, there's nepotism there. People running trading shops without knowing how to run trading shops. We're talking about how Alameda was so tied into FTX. They were front running trades. There's just so much fraud here. Like Alameda was front running trades because they knew they had a faster API than everyone else to FTX. And FTX was literally a source of income. But we're gonna have punitive regulation coming from here, especially from Democrats who he's funneled so much money to. And the conspiracy theory is that, if anybody wanted to, like the way Rockefeller brought down was the Knickerbocker Trust Company. You especially spread FUD about this stuff. You say that, things are insolvent or are going to go down. And this could very well be TradFi. It's a very well coordinated attack. They found some idiot, right? Mm-hmm. And then they gave him all this money. They knew about his connections. I mean, this is an orchestrated, if there was an orchestrated attack. I mean, a lot of things have to kind of go right. But they pumped him up. And this also can explain why, Wall Street has been very wary of coming in. And I mean, we'll see what happens. But this is, Ken Griffin is coming out, was a major Republican donor and the CEO of Citadel. He's coming out saying, how this is, going to be, there's lack of trust in the financial markets and how everyone's talking about this. This is front and center everywhere. And because there's crypto attached to it, we're missing the forest for the trees. Or maybe they're not. This is exactly what they wanted to do. DeFi didn't fail. CeFi failed, and not only that, this is just complete fraud. Like Celsius and 3 Arrows Capital are tiny compared to this. These guys are probably caught out of position. Like Celsius, in retrospect, you're looking at it, got caught out of position. We're doing things like gambling, doubling down. Not sure if there's anything that's nefarious there. This is stealing people's $10 billion. He took customers' funds, put it into VC investments, made those companies put their treasuries back onto FTX, essentially funneling money through, investing in low liquidity tokens, pumping up the price, and then making the total essentially circulating cap feel like this token is bigger, right? So if you put 10 million in a token, that's small, right? And you keep most of the tokens locked up, the circulating supply is small, you pump a little bit more, the price goes up, the total value on your books looks huge, because if 90% is locked up, you're only moving 10% of the market with a very little amount of money. You look like you have billions. I mean, there's just so much wrong here, and the crypto moves so fast that people don't do due diligence. Even the big shops,
No.
they outsource due diligence.
I'm not going to give them a pass that crypto moves so fast. Like, I'm sorry. Like, this is one of the biggest stories of Sequoia, right? You and I, we're not venture capitalists, right? But the first thing I would say is, like, show me your balance sheet, right? And now the crazy thing is, I heard a podcast with another venture fund that they pitched to, like SBF pitched to them to be part of the last deal. And then when the people asked for data, right? Literally, the person working for SBF told them, "Go fuck yourself," like in these words. Now, I'm just saying, looking at the balance sheet, that's like so basic. Now, anyone could have seen that this FTT stuff, right? Forget about the fraud and stuff. FTT, right? It's a derivative of the entire crypto market, right? And it's extremely illiquid. So it's both of those things. It's like, on the one hand, if the crypto market, collapses by 50%, FTT could collapse by like 90% because it's not liquid. And so, yeah, you can't just take the last price of FTT, multiply it by the outstanding supply, and say this is the value. Now, we're not venture capitalists, and we understand that. So how come, I understand that Sequoia, for them, it was $200 million. It's not a lot, but I mean, it's a lot.
Well,
it's a lot of money. So
what makes me mad, what makes me mad is that there are a serious founder. A friend of mine is raising money for his project. He's having the hardest time, and he has an actual business case. Now, project could fail, it could succeed, but he has a business case that's thought out, all the details are thought through. There's a revenue model attached to it. And these like Sequoia, A16Z and others are, won't take a call from him because he's a nobody. And Sequoia, you and I both know how these things are. And maybe I'm just a little bit mad. But anybody from Sequoia listening or hears this, please come on the show. Let's have a chat. Partners, we had a partner from the NEA, Ben. I'm on the show, Ben and the rest, and he's no longer with them. He started his own shop. Very competent guy. We can link the episode to this one. Great conversation about doing due diligence. Come on, guys, come from Sequoia. Come to the show. How could you? You guys are just, there's this hubris here and pompousness about who you are and what you guys all bring to the table. The failure of Sequoia to be able to see through this, and the fact that they were bragging, they were like, "Oh, is this the first trillionaire? Oh, how cool is it that he's playing League of Legends while he's pitching to you?" Like,
no, they didn't know that he was playing League of Legends.
They did?
No, how did they know?
No, they did. They were talking about it. There was a chat. I just want to make sure it's right. There's some tweets that show internal, like, "Oh, this guy is doing whatever. Oh, he's the next trillionaire. Oh, love this guy."
I thought that internally they were saying it's the next trillionaire and 10 out of 10 and stuff, but like the people from the other side were saying that he was playing League of Legends, and then they published it. What's sure is that Sequoia published on their website. Now they removed it, but they published like a write-up of like what they did. Mm-hmm. And in the write-up, it said that he played League of Legends. So like after the fact, they knew. So it doesn't really matter if they knew. I know you're looking it up right now. But
I'm looking it up right now because I don't want to be wrong.
No, but the crazy thing is like a lot of this VC stuff is really just trend following. Like I remember when I was pitching to VCs for my startup that I had, it was all about like, "Oh, this doesn't currently fit our investment thesis," right? Which is fine. I understand that you raise money. Are you still looking up of the League of Legends thing?
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe they didn't know, and I'm trying to find it, but
they published it on their website. That's all you need to know.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. I'll stop looking it up.
You raise like limited partner money, right? And so, yeah, you have to tell them that you have some kind of thesis, but like a lot of it is like, I don't want to use like NSFW words here, but like, Sequoia invested and then the pension fund invested and then somebody else says both Sequoia and the pension fund invested. So of course, it's like everybody thought that somebody else had done the due diligence. And yeah, it's so sad. But what can another thing that I was very kind of upset by is this whole effective altruism thing. I'm really starting to think that, if you think that the end justifies the means, and this is going back to many of our conversations of left versus right, so people who think that the end justifies the means are the most dangerous people. I told you privately, like both Stalin and Hitler, they really thought they were making the world a better place. Like my grandfather passed away. Sorry, my father passed away recently, and so I went into the family stuff that he had at home, and my grandfather was an ardent communist, right? He was very high up in the Bulgarian government, and I found some of his writings, and he's all about like so many poor people are suffering, all over the world. We have to help them. We have to export communism, to all over the world, because look at it here in Bulgaria, we have like a workers' paradise. And so let's build workers' paradises elsewhere. They had the best of intentions while killing like 60 million people, And so I think with SBF, it's in a sense, why wouldn't you just like put $10 million, $30 million stash them somewhere, like legally stash them. I'm not talking about hiding them, just like stash them somewhere, and then say, look, we fucked up. SBF, FTX is going bankrupt. Alameda is going bankrupt. I'm not going to jail, and I have my $30 million. But no, he had to double down to salvage everything because he had this story in his head that, I'm going to create all these billions and give them all away and, make the world a better place. And it's so dangerous. And in the meantime, he's buying a $30 million condo to his girlfriend, allegedly. And I don't know, like stuff is coming out now every day. I don't even know what's true. I'm just quoting a tweet that I read, but it's just sickening, the whole situation,
Yeah. And the fact that he lost customers, money, there are funds that are going to there's going to be a huge ripple effect. It'll take months to unwind all the ripple effects. He's causing a huge storm over our whole industry, for all the projects here, for all the exchanges, the one we work at, that are trying to do the right thing. I've never been pressured at work or even hinted to commingle customer funds with anything else or to do.
It's like criminal, right? It's not even a thought that crosses anybody's mind. I was asking, the first thing I asked, we had a mini kind of all hands meeting. I asked like, hey, can we say to people, get your coins off our exchange? Are we comfortable saying that? And all the leadership, they all said, yes, of course, we should be saying that publicly and be proud of that. That like, your funds are, in a sense, they're a liability for us, because like if we get hacked, it's a bad reputational damage for us, but we are not making money from customer funds. And then that's the other thing, like Celsius at least was promising yield. I guess FTX was also promising yield.
No. If you have your funds in a trading account, it was all on paper. The fact that they took the funds and went, people had no idea. People were exposed to massive risk without ever knowing that they were exposed to massive risk. There's just so much criminality here.
Well, I mean, they were offering yield. I just want to say this is an important lesson because a friend of mine who lost a lot of money on FTX US, he said, I was drawn by the interest on my BTC and false.
Yeah, if you probably put it into their earn program, I don't know, but if you're trading, they also took trading funds.
You generate yield from earn. On OKCoin, you cannot generate BTC yield on earn. You can generate earn on other tokens, but like they were paying BTC yield, which is where does the yield come from? And guys, I really want every one of you, whenever you talk about DeFi or whatever, there's legitimate sources of yield. For example, the arbitrage of GBTC that existed, now it doesn't exist anymore. There was an arbitrage between the futures and the spot that existed, now it doesn't exist anymore. Those are legitimate sources of yield. And then, once they stop, BlockFi, for example, they emailed their customers, sorry, we were paying you 3%, now we're going to pay you 0.1%, and that's okay. But always ask yourself, where does the yield come from if you're promised yield? And unless you have a very, very good answer to that question, just don't invest, because Bitcoin is not a yield generating instrument. There's other tokens that are engineered to generate yield. Bitcoin is not one of them. So, on dollars, it's very clear where the yield comes from. It comes from the Federal Reserve, who literally sets the yield on dollars. That's it. Very clear, So, very important. Do not, expect magical. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And it's sad that we have to learn this over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's it's quite sad, quite unfortunate, and we're gonna see just a storm of punitive regulation. and I'm sorry, but you know what? Where the hell? Let's have Gensler on the show. Where the hell was Gensler? You're talking about the SEC protecting consumers. You're chasing after Ripple. Fine. Settle the court case. It's been years. Show the evidence. Uncover your emails that talk about that show or not whether you were talking about Ripple being a security or not. Set regulations. Write them. Right? Create frameworks or guidelines. None of that is happening. He's chasing these punitive cases instead of actually spending time on writing regulation to prevent something where Sam and him are sitting and writing regulation together. The guy who you're supposed to, you let the wolf in, man. Gensler, you left the wolf in. How you're not fired? Of course you're not going to be fired.
Well,
you're tied in with war and all the other ones.
I'm sorry. To be fair, you could make the case that it wasn't his job because
make the case.
He did regulate FTX US, and part of regulating FTX US is not looking at the books, but it's just making sure that the investment.
I disagree with you.
I don't think it's the government's job to look at the books of companies. Usually they come in after. And that's actually that's my biggest case for, we don't need regulation. We need the government to just not make any promises and let the market self-regulate maybe. But because that's another podcast I heard. Literally all of the collapses have not been caught by the government. They only come after the fact and put people in jail. But all of the regulatory burden does not prevent collapses, not because regulators are incompetent, but because it's just impossible for them. How are they going to, to monitor that? Now, I have a close friend who works at FINRA, and FINRA is a great example of voluntary regulation. It's not a government body. It's a completely private thing. And then exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange and all of the biggest exchanges, they voluntarily, submit to FINRA. And then it's amazing. He told me some of the stuff they do. They have these every single trade that's executed is fed into FINRA. They have these huge AI systems that run very, very sophisticated analyses to catch things as they happen. But that's not a government entity. That's a private entity. And so
I'm not
kidding. Because
I'm not arguing.
Sorry, go ahead.
But listen, but I'm not arguing for necessarily more regulation. I'm saying you're the SEC chairman, okay? And you're supposed to be a regulator. You're focused on punitive regulation of tokens as securities, right? Instead of saying, hey, here's a framework for the space, which everyone has been asking about. Come up with there's punitive going after companies, right? Or criminal cases. And then there's writing the rules. Write the rules, whatever. Then we can debate on the rules. For example, if you take customer deposits, you cannot also lend them out. Let's have exchanges. I wouldn't mind. There's a couple of regulations that I think, to me, would be fairly easy slam dunks. Stablecoins. If you're issuing stablecoins, make sure they're backed by liquid assets and have an audit every quarter, every month, or whatever. That's not hard. You keep the money on the spread. Keep the money on managing the amounts. What circle is going to say no? I refuse to show you that we're invested in treasuries. This is an easy one, I think, right? Would you agree with this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Stable coins, keep it in treasuries. Right? Okay, fine. So there's one, right? Easy one. I think the second one is exchanges, which is we are. Show us if you want to be a U.S. regulated exchange, which we are, show us the books every quarter and just say, liabilities, right? Deposits, just so we can just see that the balance sheet is healthy, and then you're not sending customer funds out. You think we, Kraken, Coinbase, Gemini, any of the other ones would say no to this? This would be like, sure, we do this anyway. Like, this is like, sure, like, I'm not saying like over-regulate, but just basic solvency, basic solvency issues. Now, not, earn products, right? If you're money managing earn, which we're not, but others are, right? Then you are regulated in the money markets, which already exist. The regulation exists. Just help people say, okay, if you earn equals money markets, then you abide by that regulation because you're managing people's money, and that's it. They already have requirements. There will still be fraud. People still go under, but at least we have the basics down, right? The criminals will always find a way. Criminals will always find a way. But some of these basics, instead of just going after the random stuff and yelling about crypto and how we need regulation, blah, 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 because what's coming, Shimon, is much worse. What's coming is going to be much worse than these.
I know. I mean, I think we just need the FINRA of crypto. I don't trust the government because, like, what you just said, it sounds easy. It's not easy. Because, like, if you're a public company like Coinbase, right, then you already have these requirements. Everything you just said about showing your books, etc., right?
Yeah.
You're not a public company. At what level do you start requiring companies to show their books? It's, I don't know. It's
let's start the FINRA of crypto.
It's easier said than done, but my point is, I'm. We'll see what happens. But I want to change the subject currently to something optimistic because all of this has been very pessimistic. So the CPI print came lower than expected, and the markets are rallying since they published that.
PMI.
Yeah, basically everything kind of goes together. When it's bad, it's all bad. When it's good, it's all good. So what do you think of that, Alex? Do you have any thoughts?
No, it's great. It's great. Hopefully we see month over month declines in CPI. The dollar is also falling. Dollar is at 105. It's just a precipitous fall, and Bitcoin isn't moving, which is a problem. Right, because before it should be
anything about Bitcoin these days, I'm completely discounting because we don't know how much of it is driven. Like, you can't say it's a problem that it's not moving because of the dollar weakening when literally people are liquidating their like every single day to cover bankruptcies and stuff. It's currently it's so choppy. I'm kind of discounting anything that happens with the price until things settle down. When we're talking about macro stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah.
My positive take on that is double. First of all, it's great that it's the first time that it's gone down, literally since COVID. So that's like really good. Second thing, I looked at the total inflation, like just total CPI. So if we look at like May of 2020, the index was at 255. And now we are at 298. So I'll quickly calculate 298 divided by 255. So we're up like 17%. Now, remember that we spoke a while ago, and I told you my thesis, which is like we printed 40% of the dollars since COVID. Half of it is held outside the country. So basically, we're expecting a total of 20% price increase. If all else being equal, like really quickly back of the envelope, you increase the supply of money in the country by 20%, you expect the prices in the country to go up by 20%. So we're already at like 17% out of the 20%. So there's a good chance that, we're, and also Ukraine.
Wait, walk me through your logic again.
Well, you just increase the money supply by 40%, just overall. That's a fact. That's how much the Fed printed.
Mm-hmm.
Half of it is held outside of the country, which is also a fact. So you would expect prices in the country to go up by 20%.
Okay.
Like very, very basic. It's not, there's deflation from technology, there's inflation from the war in Ukraine and energy and all of that, but like just like back of the envelope,
And how are you getting 17%?
No, that's the actual. 17% is the actual change in CPI from its lowest point after COVID, which was May. Because you remember in the beginning, there was a lockdown and price of oil went negative and like people were locked down at home, they didn't consume, so there was actually a deflation in the beginning, and then from that low point in May 2020 until today, we have gone up by like 17% total.
Interesting.
So if we want to be optimistic, we can say, okay, that's kind of the end. We're in the tail end of the stuff. Also, lots of companies are of the stuff. We're at the tail end of the increases in CPI. Lots of companies are laying off lots of workers. I don't know if you're following these news, like Amazon and Facebook and tons of companies. So, especially in the tech sector. So, all of that will basically show that the Fed can pivot, stop, the aggressive hikes, and maybe even revert them. And also the fact that the Democrats performed better than expected on the midterms could be good for that, because the idea
also,
well, I don't know. I'm not a huge political person. I don't understand those dynamics, but I heard on a podcast that if the Republicans would have swept huge margin in the Senate and huge margin in the House, they would basically want things to be really, really bad for the next 2 years, so they would win in the presidential election. But now that they don't control everything, they're kind of like, they have less power, basically. Now, I don't know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, but that's just like an opinion I heard on a podcast. I'm not like...
Yeah, listen, I mean, I don't know. I think it's so divided. It's so kind of evenly split. 50 seats in the Senate. It's going to be 50-50 or 51-49 in the Senate. And then in the House, at best, I think Republicans would be 225, I think, instead of 218, which is the majority. I mean, it's so close. The one encouraging sign is it seems like Trump, candidates that Trump supported,
they're all
lost. Yeah, so it's coming to the middle. So this is like good. It's like, thank God. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, tech got decimated. What I'm nervous about is that even though the Fed will pivot or increase in lower amounts, I think they're still going to increase in maybe 50 basis points or 25 basis points. We're going to hit a recession where the earnings are going to fall, right? And so you have multiple and you have earnings, and so the stocks is going to be very subdued.
Yeah,
maybe mid.
Well, the thing is, usually the stock market turns 6 to 9 months before the recession turns, because they're anticipating.
We're saying we might not be in a recession. So let's say the stock market turns middle of next year. That's a long time. That's a long time to wait. I mean, it's a long, painful time. And what if it ranges for 10 years, which is what, some opinions are out there. So
I don't know. I'm just optimistic about the whole technology thing. I think it was just like COVID created a misallocation of capital. Now we're paying the price. We're clearing all the malinvestments, all of the things that were only, even Alameda, like people said, like if they could keep raising money at no interest, they could keep it going. The problem is that now money became expensive, and so they started entering into a debt spiral. So the government at some point will have to do that. I don't know when, but yeah, I mean, let's hope that it's not a very painful recession, and COVID is getting better. Hopefully the war in Ukraine is getting better.
Maybe sometime mid next year, the war will kind of end. I was very encouraged by when Biden met President Xi. We're trying to simmer down the tensions. And finally, China came out and said, hey, nuclear war is not acceptable, because before they were kind of standing behind Russia. So that's an encouraging sign, right? And then basically saying cooperation, because U.S. goes to war with China, which that would be just a global catastrophe.
I don't think so. I don't know. I have a lot of respect for the Chinese people in terms of they don't like to conquer other, it's like, just look at their history. Russia and China are very different.
For sure. But they think we're conquering. We think we're conquering because of Taiwan, right? Which there could be some truth to that, so to speak. Not necessarily because of Taiwan, but America is very imperialistic in general.
We'll see. I mean, I'm bullish on a multipolar world, because I think that's what the U.S. needs in order to really, really excel. I mean, again, I'm listening to all of these Elon Musk videos of like sending stuff into space. Like that's what we should be focusing on. We should be focusing on just like harvesting tons of energy. He did a really cool prize of $100 million or $150 million for any viable way to suck CO2 out of the air. Because like currently, apparently, you know, I told you that the technology exists. I was wrong. It exists, but not at scale. So it exists as a proof of concept in universities. But
it does exist. There's carbon sequestration has been around for a while.
But it's not enough to revert climate change. So it's not enough to be able to do it at scale, even if you had like a lot of energy, is what they said on the prize. I'm happy to link that X Prize video. It's Peter Diamandis, because if anybody's listening to to this podcast and can work on that, that would be amazing. Again, I really believe people say climate change. Are we going to do it by getting off fossil fuels? Eventually. But I mean, you can't force that. With the current energy prices, you can't like force people to get off fossil fuels. So it's much more efficient to use energy to sequester carbon. We have enough energy. It's just a matter of developing it. It's crazy. We haven't built a nuclear power plant in like 30 years. Europe just like underinvested in its energy, sufficiency. So those things can turn in 5 to 10 years.
By the way, it's supposed to be a warmer, hopefully this is right, than usual winter in Europe this year, which is like, thank you. Whoever is above there. So that Russia, because if it was a bad winter, Russia would have been emboldened. Hopefully these guys, this war just needs to end. There's so many people suffering. It just, and then we just have to not do the same thing we did with World War One to completely punish them. And Russia needs some sort of way out to save face. It's a very important thing. and then demilitarize, or at least get put out.
I mean, you're the expert in this. Is it true that now with is it Kherson that they evacuated? Is that the name of the city?
Yeah, Kherson.
From Kherson, now they control the only movement in and out of Crimea.
It's a huge. Because the Dnieper River runs down there, right? So it's a huge victory. The other movement to Crimea was from the Crimea. I forgot the bridge what it's called from Russia that they built, which Ukrainians, but it could be the Russians have bombed and sabotaged. So there's from the sea, there's through Kherson, and then there's through the other bridge. So they're cutting off Crimea in a major way. Yeah.
So maybe this will give Putin the out to basically say, look, the West will recognize Crimea as Russian, but basically Ukraine will have a finger on the trigger. If something happens, they can always cut off Crimea, and so that could be a stable. Because like for peace, you need just some kind of stable game theory, where like nobody has like been completely humiliated. Like for example, Israel signed the peace treaty with Egypt after the 1973 war, where Egypt could claim that they won, even though they didn't win. But what they did is they just like inflicted so many casualties on Israel that they could market this internally as like, haha, we punished, the cocky Zionists. And then we signed a peace deal, gave up all of Sinai. And I love going to Sinai. I don't care if like Egypt controls it. Like all my childhood and, my best vacations were in Sinai. They're super nice people, the Egyptians. So who cares who controls it if there's peace between the two countries? So maybe Crimea can be like, okay, it's owned by Russia, but like, Ukrainians can still go vacation there and they're not going to be harassed, and, it's going to be a good spot. And then the trigger, like controlling Kherson, could be that thing. Because like otherwise, it's like, why would Russia agree to freeze the situation in this?
Because they're losing militarily. They're just getting defeated. They have no more weapons. They're running out of weapons. They're running out of people. So the problem with this Crimea is very important because there's a port on the Black Sea. It was Sevastopol. Sevastopol. Actually, my grandfather served in Sevastopol in the Soviet fleet, in the Soviet Navy, and his ship actually had an old German water mine, and he has a war wound. This is my father's father. His ship sunk. But if you're doing that, the only port that then Ukraine has is Odessa, really. on the sea, on the Black Sea, and Sevastopol is a much more strategic port. It's kind of the end, like Crimea extends into the sea. It's the end of the sea, so Russia could, through Sevastopol, control a lot of the port. Crimea has to be demilitarized at the very, I think, least for any kind of peace agreement, and make it a peaceful resort destination, which could be fine, right? But then for Russia, why is that important for Russia? Because of the access to the Black Sea as well. I mean, Russia can create ports in other cities, but maybe that's the way to play it.
And now I heard on the All In podcast that Biden finally told Zelensky, we're not giving you any more weapons until you start like negotiating for peace. So it's the first time that the US is pushing Ukraine to like de-escalate. And it's funny because like David Sachs, who's the libertarian on the podcast, he people always blame him of being like Russian apologist and Putin boy or whatever. And he's like, no, I just want the US to have an exit strategy from this mess. Otherwise it can become another Vietnam, you know? And so then in the last episode, they played a game, which is the best intro ever. It's called Millie or Sachs. He would say something and you had to guess, was this said by General Milley or by David Sachs? And you couldn't distinguish. And this is only recently, so Milley has been de-escalating hardcore. So hopefully that's...
Who is General Milley?
He's like the head of the army or Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Listen, I'm not gonna lie. I listened to the All In as well, and Sachs is just a useful idiot. I mean, this is where he's way beyond his skis. I know I'm off camera for a second. He's way beyond his skis, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. And him and others that are trying to chime in on geopolitics, I'm sorry, they just don't know what they're talking about.
I know, so
it's
that's
a very Western
game of Milley or Sachs to show that his opinion now became the he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I just looked it up. He's the number one person.
I mean, I don't know, maybe, but again, this is Western false. It's just a political move so that Biden, before next year, can say that he wound down the war. There's a very different mentality between Eastern Europeans, especially Russians, and the Western world. I was talking to this a mother of my kids in the same place. She's Polish, and the Czech. We have Czech friends. Everyone from Eastern Europe understands. The Russian mentality is one of strength. It's a very brutal mentality. It's literally the top dog runs the pack. And as soon as you show weakness to Putin, he's going to come back in 10 years with a much stronger army, and it's going to be the same thing. He has to be fully defeated. That is the only way out of this. Otherwise, we're doing the same thing we did in 2008 and 2009, is we stopped the great financial crisis, which led us arguably to what's happening now. So the question is, do we want a complete unwind later on, but in 10 years, or do we want to just take care of the problem now? And this is always thing of pushing can down the road.
The question is like, how do you define defeat, right? So like, from what I'm seeing is like a lot of their air force has been destroyed. A lot of their, tanks have been destroyed. Like it's pretty big defeat so far.
Yeah, but you can rebuild all that.
Okay, but the point is it changes the whole perception. So the Russians had a perception of the Red Army has never lost. It was a very, very strong perception. It was like the White Army lost, Lenin came to power, founded the Red Army, and they've never lost since then. And so now, all you have to do is just basically build a narrative where you lost. And so hopefully that will change the calculation of people going forward. Another cool thing that I heard on an Israeli podcast of the INSS, which is the academic, basically it's like a national security agency, but just academic. So it's all kind of open source and all the generals go to work there. So they said in a democracy, the head of the state is not afraid of its own army. So you have an incentive to promote good people. Versus in a dictatorship, the head of the state is afraid of his own army, so he promotes the worst possible people to be incompetent, right?
Yeah.
So they can threaten him. And you can really see this, like apparently people are mocking the guy who did the report on withdrawal from Kherson. He's like, he looks like an idiot. And like the Russian people, they're not stupid. Like the people, and they see this on TV and they're like, what the fuck? Like, you draft us, which you said you wouldn't. Now you're managing this war really poorly. And so now they have internal pressure to just like wind it down.
In Russia to wind it down?
Yeah, like a pressure from the people to Putin to wind down the war because like it's just not going well and people are just
Yeah, of course, but he also is getting pressure from the hard ultra hawks that if he doesn't figure this out, they're coming after him. A guy yesterday, Dugan, who is like ultra hawk, said you better win the war, or he said, or you're going to be face the same fate as the fate of the king of the rain or something like that. It was this old story to the king who there was a drought and he didn't make the gods have rain, so he got killed.
just like
The people,
Ruslan and Ludmila, you will be punished by the dragon.
no, no, but seriously, that this is the problem, right? Because the Russia is ruled; it's a mafia state, and in the mafia state, top dog wins. And so, as soon as you start losing, you're no longer the top dog, and you're going to get off. The question is whether he's going to get off by someone that's worse than him, right? And the people who are controlling the military forces, like Prigozhin, which is the guy who's enlisting the prisoners. The guy who runs Wagner. That's right. He was a convict himself. He was 10 years in jail for violent crimes, and this guy is like running.
He's like
he was put in
my buddies from from the prison.
Do you know how he got started? He's Putin's personal chef after jail. You know, spent 10 years in jail for violent crimes, then became Putin's personal chef, Chef Prigozhin, and now he runs all these companies, casinos. The whole fucking place is dirty, man. It's just a cesspool. And they're going to come after him, and I'm not sure anyone knew is going to be better. You know?
Yeah, my wife Kate is my personal chef, and if I was a dictator, I would totally let her run my paramilitary special forces.
Yeah, we'll run it. Oh, okay, man.
Hopefully we got a little bit of positive news at the end.
Yeah.
You know, those are hard times, but you know, we'll get through it. We'll get through it because of technology, and we're finally turning the corner. And it's really good to chat with you, Alex, and get the latest updates.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk soon.
Thank you, everybody. Please like us, subscribe. It really helps. We're seeing a really nice growth in our download numbers recently. So please keep it going, and we'll get some really cool guests lined up.
Talk soon.